Well, how do you know what's in it to oppose it?
Right.
If you look at the text of the bill basically mirrors what the federal statute already is that is on the books. They just want to enforce the law.
Right.
And I know the big buzzword is racial profiling.
Right.
And the text of the law actually points out that there are specific stringent guidelines that prevents them. Now, granted, you're always going to have bad apples. I mean, you can't prevent that. Even if you say, hey, there's racial...
Even if this law doesn't pass,
right.
I mean, it's still going to end up, you're going to have people doing that.
I mean, supposedly racial profiling is not the law of the land in the state of Maryland. But ask any African-American in Baltimore City late on a Saturday night, I'm sure it happens. And that's just a function of the way society is, and there are always going to be bad apples. As far as illegal immigration, to get back to that real quickly, is we have to decide as a nation, are we a nation of laws or not? There are already laws on the books concerning legal immigration. And to just open up the doors and say, okay, well, there's whatever the current number is that they're using, 10 million, 12 million, 20 million illegal immigrants that are already here. We can't possibly send them all back, so let's just give them all amnesty. Well, one, that's a slap in the face to every legal immigrant that has come here over the past 230 years, 234
right, because
years.
they spent so much time working to get here.
Right. They showed that they have a willingness to abide by our laws and follow the rule of law and become a legal immigrant or a legal citizen. But we've also tried amnesty. Back in the mid-1980s, Ronald Reagan signed on to an amnesty bill because he was told, this is the last time. If we do this now, these 4 million illegal aliens that are here, it'll take care of the problem. We'll never have to deal with it again. We're here 30 years later, and where are we? You know, we've got the same problem. It's just been magnified. So we have to enforce the laws that are already on the books. I think it's twofold, and neither one can be done without the other, because if you just secure the border, people are still going to find a way in because the jobs are here. But secondly, you also have to crack down on the employers that are illegally hiring these people that don't have a legal right to work here and to be here. So if you crack down on the employers, you take away the incentive of a job and benefits and everything else for these people to come, as well as secure the border. That, I believe, will take a large number of them and help them see the light and say, well, we're going to have to go somewhere else. And it also takes working with not only Mexico, but also Canada, because as you said, national security, it is a huge concern, because there's been congressional studies that we don't hear a whole lot about, that it's not just Mexican immigrants or Latin American immigrants that are coming up through Mexico and through the southern border, or even the northern border down. There are people that want to do us harm that are coming through. There are plenty of terrorists. They've seen where they're coming through. They found evidence of these guys coming through and leaving some of their clothing and their equipment behind. So if we don't do something, one, it's hurting us financially and economically, because of the billions of dollars we're spending every year to take care of the illegal alien problem. But it also is costing us in our national defense and our homeland security, because we don't know who is here and what their intentions are. As with anything else, you don't want to just open up your door and leave your doors unlocked in your home, because you want to be safe. You don't want to just say, hey, I'm going to have a party and get on the radio and say, everybody come on out to my house, because you don't know who's coming. You have no idea who's coming and what their intentions are. What you're going to do is you're going to wake up in the morning and find out that all of your stuff is gone. Or worse, you're going to get attacked. And you know, it all comes down to common sense. You're not going to do it in your home. Why would you do it nationally with our borders in our country?
Now, another big point that's been in the news prior to a lot of these immigration laws coming up, something that was huge in the news was healthcare reform. We signed a brand new bill into law, which is going to start taking effect very shortly, and should be finished by 2014. What's your stance on healthcare reform?
Well, I'm all for reforming healthcare. What they passed down in D.C. a couple of months ago was nothing about reforming healthcare.
Now, where do you feel like the fault kind of lies? Do you feel like, the Republicans were kind of pushing against it so hard that they had to make concessions, or did the Democrats, just pass something that was just not good?
Well, I think there's a lot of blame and fault to go around down there. The main problem was they didn't really focus on trying to fix any of the problems, which is the high cost of healthcare, where it's been shown that, okay, you want to reduce the cost of healthcare, you have to, there's several things that work as far as health savings accounts and making your health insurance portable. So if you have here in Maryland a health insurance policy as you work here, but let's say you move to Minnesota. Well, you can't have the same health insurance plan here now that you're in Minnesota because, well, you can't take that plan with you. Even if you're with the same company, that plan's going to change because now you're in a different state with different regulations.
Right.
So there's a high cost and a high disproportionate level of coverage depending on where you go. So those are some of the little things, some of the things they put into this bill that they passed. It's going to cost us all a whole lot more money. I mean, as well as some of the things they did with Medicare. Like, as far as Medicare Advantage, by the time I think it's 2017, half of Medicare Advantage enrollees will be cut off. They're going to cut the enrollment for Medicare Advantage by half in 2017, which means the people that are on Medicare Advantage are going to have to go look somewhere else for coverage. One of the things, as far as the cost of it, companies, I think it was like AT&T came out 3 or 4 weeks after the bill was passed, and they said, this bill is going to cost us $1 billion to implement. Wow. Just to provide the level of coverage that was in the bill. Right. Well, it doesn't take masters in business to figure out what AT&T and some of these large corporations are going to do. It's going to be cheaper for them to stop covering people and pay the fine and tell their employees, will go to the government and get your coverage. Right. Because it's cheaper for them to do it. If they don't, it's going to cost them too much money. And if they stay covering their employees with that and absorb that cost, what happens to all of their products and services from AT&T? Their prices go up. So then we all pay more as a result of AT&T trying to cover their employees. So in order for AT&T to stay competitive in the business market, they look at it and say, it's cheaper for us to pay the fine.
Right. A lot of people talking about, the medical costs and doctors and all that stuff. But I mean, you really sometimes don't realize how it's going to affect different aspects of the nation. I mean, you just pointed out AT&T. That's a perfect example of something that seemingly is completely unrelated, totally being affected by this healthcare reform, and then eventually making its way down to us.
Right. And what people don't understand a lot of times is when government officials and politicians get up there and they say, well, this is only going to affect the corporations. Well, even if you don't have an AT&T phone, you go to Walmart to buy whatever, Walmart may be using AT&T service. So now their AT&T bill just went up. What does Walmart have to do to cover that? As with anything that comes down and it costs them to do business, they pass that cost along to the end consumer. So the end consumer now ends up absorbing that extra cost from their AT&T service, as well as everything else. One of the things that's out there in the news today is they're talking about quadrupling the federal tax on oil and gas, which, all right, well, some people may say, well, I take the bus everywhere. That's not going to affect me.
Right.
Well, how does the meat and the milk and everything else get to the grocery store? Right. It's got to be delivered. The farmer, he's got to put gas and diesel into his tractors so he can do all of the work to get your gas and your milk and your corn and everything else into harvest. All of that gets passed along to the end consumer to the point where, okay, on the surface, it's like, okay, it's only 32 cents a gallon of per gas that extra I'm paying. Okay, 30 cents. I've got 30 cents in my pocket. I can cover that. But wait, now let's add that up every step of the way down the line for every product and service that you buy. All of that gets passed along to the end consumer. And they like to say, oh, this is not going to affect the poor or the middle class or the low income. Every tax that they pass down to a corporation or a business gets passed along because it only makes business sense to pass that cost along. Otherwise, they don't stay in business very long.
You can check out his website, www.troystoffer.com. Troy, once again, thank you very much for coming out. Best of luck.